All right, so today we're heading out on the Polaris. We are going to be sighting in our hunting rifle and also checking out some hunting area for this upcoming season.
We're also going to be harvesting some wildflowers and blueberries while we are out too. Okay, so let's head out. Golly, man. Oh! All right, so Eric and I finally made it out here. We took a different trail at first, but quickly realized that that was going to be too muddy for us. So we took the usual route, which is up in this hillier area, and it is loaded with berries and flowers that we're collecting. This is blueberries, or these are blueberries right here. And this is a really good patch, so we're gonna go ahead and just pick these off. We've already got a whole bunch of watermelon berries and rose hips that we found when we were climbing the hill. So we've been harvesting blueberries where we live and down the road from us on our other property for about a month now. But these ones are really, really big and they're super, super tasty. Some of them are still a little sour, but they do get a little sweeter as they ripen. And they're pretty good size for being a wild blueberry. So we have made jelly out of them. I'd like to make jam. And I also am going to be putting these in scones. Another way we also have been eating them is just cooking them down with a teeny tiny bit of sugar and using them over pancakes for syrup. So this is a watermelon berry plant, and this is a new plant for Eric and I. We have been picking them for quite a while. And I believe they're called watermelon berries because they actually taste like a watermelon and their texture is almost similar too. These are very ripe. They start out like a yellow creamy color and then they go red and then they get really this crimson color when they're ripe. And they're super good, just mild, not really very sweet, more watery tasting. And we've been using these for fresh eating and also for jellies too. One other berry we are picking while we're out here is a crowberry. They look like this. They're pretty dark blue or black, and they grow on like this little shrub. We have a lot of them back home, but there's also a lot here. And again, fresh eating berries, or you can also cook them down. That's what we're going to be doing with these ones that we take home. The rose hips are, I don't believe they're edible raw like this, so you can process them and use them in jams, or you can process them the way we're going to process them and strain them for a jelly.
All right, so we made it out here pretty far, and pretty sure my rifle is sighted in and ready to go for moose season, but we are going to take a few shots. We brought a steel target out here, and I'm going to try to get out at 100 yards, and we'll make sure that it's all zeroed in. All right, today we're shooting our 270. This is a Remington 700, and this used to be Ariel's dad's gun, and it's from 1986. So it is nice and old, but it's in, obviously you can tell it's in mint condition. He didn't put many rounds through this. So we're gonna get her sighted in.
Okay, so this is our haul. It doesn't seem like very much. It's probably maybe 6, maybe 8 cups of berries. And it takes quite a while to pick them to fill up something like this. Obviously it's not full. We are going to head back now. It's later in the afternoon, and I think we've been over like 30 miles today. We still have quite a long journey home, at least a few hours. And we're just gonna be picking some fireweed along the way and yarrow as well. And I will show you when we stop by that plant. Next day, and we are back in our kitchen. I went ahead and sorted through our berries that we picked the other day, and I've got some of the fireweed cleaned up, and I have our yarrow just sitting here. I was going to talk about that today and what we're doing with that, but first we are making scones. So I'm going to use some of the watermelon berries from yesterday and some of the crow berries and blueberries that we picked. First, I need to get all the dry ingredients in this bowl. So we're starting with 2 cups of flour. We're going to put in half a cup of sugar, half a teaspoon salt, and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I'm just going to mix this together real quick And then I will add in our coconut oil. You can use butter, but I don't have butter. We don't really buy it, so I'm going to be using coconut oil. I often substitute that in if a recipe calls for butter. That is our coconut oil, and I have about 5 tablespoons in there of that. I'm just mashing in that coconut oil now. I'm using a little masher. I'm just gonna mix it until I get these little clumps in there. I'm just gonna scoot this stuff to the side in the bowl, and then I'm gonna be mixing the liquid ingredients over there. So I'm gonna add a little bit of applesauce. I'm gonna do 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And we are using 3/4 cup, half and half. You can use heavy cream, and you can also use an egg instead of applesauce, but we often use applesauce again to substitute eggs. Now I'm going to combine the wet and dry ingredients. Now that I've got that mixed, I'm going to add in some berries. I'm going for about 1 cup of berries altogether. And again, I'm just mixing these watermelon berries with the blueberries and crowberries. We've got a cast iron skillet, and I'm going to put this dough in there. It's not a very wet dough, it's more crumbly. I'm just gonna push this down to get a nice even layer. And lastly, I'm just going to sprinkle some sugar on top, just a tiny bit. We don't usually do a glaze on our scones, and we like to cut it ahead of time. There we go. We've already got our oven preheated to 400 degrees, so we will get this in there. While it's in the oven, I was just going to talk about what we're doing with this fireweed that we collected the other day and the yarrow. So we have got a few questions on how we do teas and how we specifically dry the herbs. And it's pretty straightforward. We do have a dehydrator, which you can dry plenty of herbs in, but it does come at a high cost of our solar system to us. So we just air dry pretty much everything, including cooking herbs, flowers, all of that. So I prepared this fireweed the other day by just stripping it of the stems, and I kept the leaves that we collected and the flower blooms, and I went ahead and rinsed it just because there are some bugs in that, and we've let it dry on this table for about a day. I have the towel underneath it just so it absorbed that extra moisture, but it will not dry the way we need it to sitting right here. So I'm going to go ahead and move it over to a window screen rack. It's not necessarily what you want to use for drying herbs or flowers, but it works for us, and we had an extra one lying around, so that's what we've been using this year. So I just put the fireweed on this window screen we have here, and this has been perfect for us because it allows airflow from the top and the bottom. That's what you need when you're drying this types of thing for tea. It also has a really thin mesh, so nothing's going to go through it. And in the future, we're probably going to have a better system, but again, this has been working. Next to it, I have chamomile that has been drying for about a week. It's almost dry. You can tell when they have no moisture in them, they get really, really dry and almost crunchy. So we're looking for that consistency in order to know that it's safe for me to put it in a jar and put it away for winter. I find the fireweed takes about the same time, usually a week. It also just depends on where you live, your humidity, and the airflow and the temperature that is around these when they're drying. This is what the fireweed leaves look like when they're dry. I have a few little blooms in there too. And this is a marigold and chamomile mixture. I think there maybe even be some borage in there, but that's what it looks like. So again, we're just putting a lot of this aside now since we have the flowers and we have the resources, and then we'll be able to use these in winter for tea and or for cooking too. Another way to dry herbs is also to hang them by their stem if they have a big enough stem and they're not like a little flower petal. And a good example of that is this parsley. I can pick it off with the stem so it can hang like this and dry relatively easy. Something like that in a bundle does sometimes take a little longer. I find those take me about 2 weeks to dry all the way to where I need them to be, that consistency. What I am going to do now is go ahead and get this yarrow ready. This is much simpler. It dries pretty quickly. I'm just going to separate this bundle probably into two bundles, two smaller bundles, put some twine around it, and go ahead and hang it up outside. With yarrow, you can use the flower and the leaves for tea. So we're going to be using both of that when they're dried. And I find it has, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's a really fresh, sweet smelling flower. We're going to head outside to hang these up now. This is my little station, if you can tell where I hung yarrow last time. I forgot I left the string out here. But it's a really good spot to dry things because it gets even more airflow than our house, and that will just quicken your drying time. Generally, when I dry herbs, I like to dry them out of direct sunlight. I forgot to show what the yarrow looks like as a finished product. This is stuffed into a little jar here. And it's a really, really nice tea. I particularly don't find that this one makes us sleepy, but with chamomile and the marigolds, these are very strong. So I would only drink this if you're planning on going to bed very soon. It's been 15 minutes, so let's go ahead and check on our scones. These scones are done. We are going to get them cut up and eat some of them, and then we're going to get going on some of the other things that we are making with the berries. So with the remainder of the berries and the rose hips that we cooked yesterday, I have plans to make a blueberry jam. And with the watermelon berries and the rose hips, we're going to be making a jelly, so I will be straining these. First up, I am starting with the jam. I have about 5 cups of blueberries, and I'm going to add half of a lemon. And we are adding a 1/4 cup of the sugar, and then we're gonna add a full package of low sugar pectin. I'm gonna give these a quick mash just to get some of those blueberries smushed down, and then we're gonna heat this up until it comes to a boil. We've got this mixture boiling. I'm going to add the rest of our sugar, and I'm doing about 1.5 cups in addition to the 1/4 cup we had in there earlier. And we're gonna mix it in first, and then let it get to a really high boiling point and let that go for about a minute, and then we will be done and ready to can it. Okay, so we used a little bit of a small pot this time, but it seemed to work. We're gonna turn that off and get it into our jars. I'm thinking maybe 5, maybe 6 jars, we'll see. These are half pints. And again, these are crowberries and blueberries. The crowberries don't taste the same as a blueberry, but they have a similar size to a blueberry, so that's why I just threw them in with this recipe. We need a 1/4 inch headspace. Okay, we ended up filling about 6.5 half-pint jars. The last little jar we're just gonna put in the fridge once it cools, and we'll eat that one fresh. But I am gonna wipe these down with vinegar, and then we'll get the lids on them, and we will water bath them for 10 minutes. While we are water bathing the jam outside, I'm gonna start with our jelly. I'm gonna add the watermelon berries. I think it's about 2.5 cups to that saucepan, and then I will be adding the rose hips. This is about 1 cup. And what I was talking about earlier is we're straining it, so it's not a big deal, but if you're gonna make jam out of it, you wanna take the seeds out, and you'll just be using the outer part of the rose hip. I'm gonna add 2.5 cups of water and get that to a boil. So we went ahead and let that boil for a little over a half an hour, and I did go ahead and mash some of that stuff up. You can tell it's pretty much all worked out, a lot of that flavor, and I'm going to be transferring the liquid and straining it now into another saucepan. And I have just this little cheesecloth here, and I have a strainer underneath it. Those are all the seeds from the watermelon berries. They have a real seedy texture, so that's why we're doing jelly with this one. I have to let this cool before I can squish out some of that moisture, and then we will pick back up and finish with the jelly process. I have the jelly strained, and I am going to get our lemon juice in here, as well as a 1/4 cup of the sugar we're using, and I am using half a packet of pectin, which comes out to a little bit under a 1/4 cup. Now I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of the sugar and get our burner turned on. We need to bring this to a boil, and then we will add the remainder of the sugar. I'm using 1 cup total for this recipe, and at that point we're going to let it boil for another minute, and then we'll be ready to put it in these little half pints. Alright, so I'm going to add the rest of the sugar now that it's boiling. This has been boiling for about a minute, so I'm going to get it off the heat. I did add probably about another cup of water throughout this process. I just wanted it to be a little more diluted, and I think I can get a good set with that. So I'm going to go ahead and pour it in our jars. So this made 4 half pints exactly, and it is really good flavor. We have yet to use the watermelon berries or the rose hips for jelly, and it just has almost like a fruity flavor to it. So I really like it. We are going to wipe these with vinegar and water bath them for 10 minutes. Okay, so we just pulled out our jelly and it's still setting up, but it's a really nice color. And this is the jam. The jam ended up being really thick. That's already had time to cool. I've got these labeled and I'm going to run them down now to the root cellar. So Eric and I have been really thrilled so far with this summer as far as us being able to harvest berries and flowers and just wild edibles. It seems like there's just so many different things to harvest from spring to fall. So we've really been enjoying that, and it also is easier for us that way because we don't have to plant that type of thing. So we do have some raspberries and hascat berries, but we didn't plant blueberries, and we don't really plan to plant a lot more berries at all because they are already in nature, and it's just easier to go get them that way for us, and they're probably healthier too. Thanks for watching us on another canning episode. We will catch you guys next time.